Robson. Like other members, I wanted to speak in this debate because I have a family in my constituency who are affected. I won't go over what PKU is or what Kuvan is, because I thought the Honourable Lady did an excellent job in her excellent opening speech on this, and I really want to congratulate the work that she's done as chair of the APPG on bringing this to wider attention across the House. Scotland has a higher prevalence of PKU than other parts of the UK, which makes the attitude of the Scottish Medicines Council so disappointing. The SMC has a very, very poor record of approving treatments for very rare diseases, and the current application is not, as I understand it from my discussions with the NSPKU, going particularly well. The decision is due next week on the 3rd of July, and I think there is a real concern that it will not be approved, not even for very high-risk groups like pregnant women. The Honourable Lady mentioned that there's currently a pretty poor policy for Kuvan for pregnant women in England. Well, it might be a poor policy, but at least it is a policy. We don't even have that north of the border. And of course, pregnancies for PKU women are extremely high risk. And we have this slightly odd fail-first approach in this country, which can lead to really serious defects for lifelong disabilities for the child that's born if it survives. And of course, the costs to the NHS of treating those disabilities over the life of the child are significantly more expensive than what the cost of Kuvan would have been for the mother, even during pregnancy. So we have this very odd approach to cost effectiveness when looking at medicines in this country, which I really think we need to reassess. And that's not just true of Kuvan. We've seen it when we were talking about Orkambi and various other issues as well. I completely agree with the NSPKU, who wanted the application for Kuvan to be held under the ultra-orphan stream due to the rareness of the condition and the Scottish gene variant. And I would really ask, because I was quite disappointed to hear with the lack of engagement that the Scottish Government has had with the NSPKU, if the SNP members present could perhaps try and do something there, because whilst I appreciate there is a distinction between the Scottish Government and the Scottish Medicines Council, I do think that the Health Secretary could be stepping it up a little bit there. As a Scot, someone from the Greater Glasgow, I of course was drinking Iron Brew when I met the NSPKU in Portcullis House, and actually that led on to quite an interesting discussion, because Iron Brew was a drink that could be given to young adults with PKU as a kind of a treat, as something to be made normal. But then of course we introduced the sugar tax, and suddenly overnight the recipe for Iron Brew was changed and it could no longer be drank. It suddenly became toxic. And this was one of those situations where a very well-meaning policy like the sugar tax had unintended consequences, and members will know it too from perhaps diabetic constituents who got in touch with them when Lucozade changed their recipe. Suddenly, this thing that they could drink and was safe, they couldn't. And unless you have very good eyesight, it's very hard to read on the can that the recipe has changed. And of course, we're also in this odd situation where in Scotland, depending on which shop you go to, you can either have old recipe Iron Brew or new recipe Iron Brew. So you have to be checking very, very carefully. And it is this kind of idea where we don't do a very good job, I think, of looking at the potential unintended consequences of changes in health policy for special interest groups. And that was something that I wanted to mention. And I just want to, kind of in the last minute that I've got, one of the things that really struck me was in our discussions, I've got a 4-year-old daughter, and it was put to me, in 12 years' time, your daughter's going to be going out and you're going to be worried about her having alcohol, smoking. Imagine being a parent with a PKU child where you're worried about your child going to a friend's house and eating a bag of crisps. I mean, the difference in terms of the strain and pressure is so, so huge. And so for the family in my constituency, 10-year-old Katie and 20-month-year-old Harry, their parents said to me that having PKU is a constant shadow that hangs over the family. Everywhere you go, you're surrounded by food they just can't eat. Katie's 10 and wishes she could eat what her friends can, or even a little bit of it. But she is aware, even at age 10, of the implications of brain damage if she doesn't stick to her diet. Kuvan might not work, but if it did, it would be life-changing. And it is just so sad knowing that our 1-year-old has all this ahead of him. We can and we really should do more to get Kuvan out there. Yeah.